everyone, it's Datrina from the Alluring Bead Boutique, and welcome to my very first member-only video. Today we're going to work on the project to make a bracelet just like this one right here. This is a pattern that I came up with, I don't know, I think maybe a couple of years ago, and I named it the Dentelle Violet because I looked really like French lace to me. One of the hardest things I have to do in my job is try to figure out what to call patterns and what to call jewelry designs. But anyhow, it's a really pretty little piece of jewelry. I love it. It's worked in this manner. You start on one end, add your clasp. We work down through here. We come back up. Then we add this side of the bracelet. Of course, we'll put our clasp on first and then work all the way up and finish up here. We can work it one of two ways. We can work it by creating the back side first, which is the, these little sections here using right angle weave, and then come back through and fill it in with these beautiful little candy beads. What I really love about this bracelet is the dimension of it. So if you'll see the way that I worked it out here, the base actually, the candy bead actually sits well above the base. And if you turn it on the side, you can see right here that it's got a really pretty dimension to it. But due to the way I embellished it and everything, you really don't have any exposed thread along the side of these candy beads. If you notice right there. And then I used a lot of super doers here as my connectors. But along the components here on each little unit, I used O beads. You can see it really good right here. That's the O bead out here because it makes a pretty embellishment. But it also makes it easy to get through in the center here to connect this unit to this unit. So I've been toying with the concept of this for a couple of days. I'm actually meant to get started last week, but I ran into a huge problem over on my website, and it pretty much took me all week to get that figured out. And what I was playing around with were these cabochon, two-hole cabochon beads. However, they do not work out in this pattern. And it's due to the size of the bead. The candy beads are 8 millimeters. And the cabochon beads are quite a bit smaller. I don't even think they're a full 6 millimeters. And so it doesn't really work out in the pattern. Did make a few little adjustments and try to work it out, but I didn't like the way it came out. Too small looking. I like this one a lot better, so I'm going to show you how to use the candy beads. The color I'm going to use today are just this beautiful little opaque turquoise, and these are check beads. I got my strands over at Hobby Lobby, and when I shop Hobby Lobby, every few weeks or at least once a month, Hobby Lobby will put all of their tubed beads, their check glass beads, their strung beads, all of that stuff they'll have on sale at 50% off. Once or twice a month, and sometimes all month. And that also includes like their little true two beads, their two-hole beads. These came from there as well. And so I do a lot of shopping over there because I like the instant gratification, but I always shop their sales. As I said, I've used O beads in this bracelet. But what I'm going to use today are these little 4 millimeter metallic donut beads. And I usually get these, I believe I got all of these at Joann's. And you can find them online. You just need to shop in the metallic bead sections of your favorite craft and hobby stores. But if I hold this O bead up and show you guys, they're almost exactly the same size. The metallic one is a 4 millimeter and O beads are 3.8 millimeter. But it's so insignificant that they swap out really easily. And I've used these before in a couple of my tutorials, and they work out great in lieu of an O bead. But if you don't have these and you can't find them, you can always get yourself some of these cute little O beads. And they come in all kinds of colors and finishes. They're another check glass bead. And these ones here are just Capri. Let's see what they are. They are transparent Rosalind Capri Gold. And that is what I used in this bracelet. And my 11-O's in this bracelet were just some Toho 11-O metallic rose gold permafinish. For today's bracelet, I'll be using these permafinish galvanized aluminum toe host in 11/0 size. And let's see, what else do we have? All right, we have an 8/0, which in this bracelet, I used this bronze berry 8/0. I think, let me look at the exact color. So I was completely wrong about that 8/0. Those are higher metallic amethyst. The candy beads in the purple bracelets are just purple pearl finish is what the color said on the packaging. The super duos I used, I actually had gotten in another pack just like this over at, well, it comes in these little check glass. These are Bead Treasure brand. And you can hunt for these online, but Hobby Lobby sells them, and they sell all of their stuff online. And this is just a dark purple matte. As you can see, maybe you can see it better from the back. There we go. I'm also going to be using some 15/0s, and on this bracelet here I used matte transparent light amethyst. It's a little hard to see, but they come along the sides of these super duos here. And then I also use them on the portion where I'm upraising these candy beads. You can barely see them right there. They're so transparent behind the 11/0s, which butt up against the holes of the candy beads like that on the unit. For my 8/0s I'm going to use today are these silver line black diamonds, and these are another check glass seed bead. I've used these in a lot of project videos. I just love them. They're really pretty. They're a really easy way to add a little richness and depth of the color to your bead project without overwhelming your other options. Here are your other color choices. I also have out some of these little True 2 check glass fire polish beads. And they are a true 2mm bead. I'm thinking of trying to incorporate these into my design today. I'm going to kind of play it by ear. The difference you have here is like in the size, obviously, so where you would substitute in a 2mm bead into this pattern. So, for example, would I be able to substitute a true 2 for an 8mm or an 11/0 bead? Well, let's take a look at the size of those two seed beads. An 8mm measures, in general, roughly 2.5mm in size. I mean, an 8/0 bead, I'm sorry. An 8/0 bead measures 2.5mm in size, on average. 11/0 seed beads measure 1.8mm in size. So if you were going to try to substitute out some true 2 beads, your better option would be to substitute them where in lieu of some 11/0s in your project or pattern. Now let's talk about the clasps for just a moment. Because this is a double strand bracelet, I chose to use 2 lobster claws on the end of it. I also chose to use jump rings here and just run those through my 8/0 seed beads here on the end of my connection component. And I kind of like the way it turned out. As you can see, when you clasp it up, it looks really pretty. Let me see if I can hold on to it here. It makes for a really pretty, unique closure on the bracelet. And it doesn't bump up when you put your arm down flat. It's pretty smooth down there, so if you work a lot, if you work in an office and you're typing a lot or something, it's not bumpy on the back side, which can be kind of aggravating when you work on the computer. So, what I have out here, and I should have gotten a couple more out because you need a jump ring on each end to work it this way. I don't suggest using these soldered closed jump rings because basically you're not going to be able to get them through your 8/0, first of all. You potentially could just leave off the 8/0 and sew this jump ring straight in, but that would put that jump ring sideways like that. That's a design choice. It's totally up to you. But as far as the size of my jump rings go, and I do have to get out just a couple of more, the jump rings I'm using are 6mm on the outer diameter. And then I just have 2 stainless lobster claw clasps. And I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to do it this way because I like the way it looks and I like the way it came out. So while I'm getting these jump rings out, I just wanted to chat with you just a moment. If you've watched the introduction video to my memberships only videos, I had stated in there that I'm going to try to be a little less formal. However, I'm also going to try to include a lot more information, design information, like we've talked about today, like how to do substitutes and how you can maybe try to change a pattern up to accommodate a smaller bead. Just different little things like that that we're going to get into in much more detail here on the memberships than we would say on the free one. All right, so let me clear all of this off, and when I get back, we are going to get started. All right, so I've got my bead mat all laid out. I have all of my beads opened and got several little piles of each laying out everywhere here. I wanted to talk for a moment about thread because basically most of my bead choices today are opaque, and which ones that are not, which are these silver lined black diamond beads here, these check glass beads, they are silver lined, so you're not going to see a whole lot of thread inside of those. My concern was using a black thread like black satin or smoke with these transparent smaller beads here. I didn't want those beads to darken up, and they will darken up with darker threads. And so I'm just going to go ahead and use my 6-pound fire line in the crystal. And like I said, we are going to start on this one end of our bracelet, and we're going to start with this little unit right here, and we're going to work down the one whole side of this bracelet. I'm going to move some of this stuff out of the way so my thread doesn't get constantly hung up. And I'm going to go ahead and pick up these beads. I am going to pick up a black diamond 8-0, an 11-0, a super duo, and another 11-0. And I'm going to be bringing this all the way down. I'm going to leave myself a little bit of thread, just enough to get rid of later and enough to hold on to right now. Then, of course, we're just going to pass through all these beads again, because basically we are just doing right angle weave to create our base. And I don't have a lot of thread on my needle at this point. I'm just using some I had left over, so that will give me an opportunity to show you guys how to add thread in this project a little bit later on. Now what we're going to do is you can either tie a knot here, or you can just pass through that 8-0 bead one more time so that you form a complete circle and your beads position themselves like they should right here. All right. Now you can also add a little stop bead here if you have trouble maintaining tension without tying a knot. I might show you guys how to do that. It's pretty easy. We will just use one of these 11-0 beads. All you got to do, if you didn't do it in the beginning, like I didn't, is just put a bead on the thread. Let it slide down a little bit. Bring the end of the thread back around to this side and poke it through. Doesn't work so great if you're trying to use a 15-0 or something for a stop bead, but these little Toho's got a pretty big hole, and an 8-0 has an even bigger hole, so either one. So I'm just got this little stop bead I added on. The trick to it is to make sure that you don't pull your little unit out of shape by pulling that stop bead up too tight, and don't accidentally sew through it. So now we're positioned here. We're coming out of our 8-0. Mine's coming out to the left. I sew in a little different direction because I'm left-handed. I'm going to come back through and reinforce this unit because this is the clasp end of my bracelet, and I want to make sure that I've got enough thread in there so that normal wear and tear will not cause that to loosen up or potentially break a thread. And you'll notice that I work my reinforcement the one bead at a time. I don't like to cut corners in right angle weave because it can misshape these delicate little units. So I take my time, and now I've worked my way around one bead at a time. I'm exiting in the same place. Now I'm ready to move into position into this super duo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew down the 11-0. Then I'm going to sew across the super duo once again. And now I'm ready to make the next portion of my component of my connection piece here, which, as you can see, includes these small 15-0 accent beads, some 8-0s, and another super duo. So I'm exiting what's the top hole of this super duo bead. I'm going to pick up 2 of these 15-0s, and I'm going to sew through the bottom hole on the same side that my working thread is currently exiting. And I'm going to bring those little beads around just like that. I'm going to pick up 2 more and sew back up through the top. Just like that. Now I have those little accent beads sitting there. I need to sew down through both of those beads to move through my work and position myself. Then I want to sew over through my super duo only. So that this is what we have so far. So here's a little fun fact. I did a little instant rewind. I did not like the way these seed beads looked accenting my super duo. So plus I was having trouble with getting these little O-rings to stay where I wanted them to. So basically I have backtracked completely out, and I'm going to start the video over here where we are accenting this super duo. And I'm using instead these little 15-0 permanent finished galvanized beads that are the exact same color as my 11-0s. Wonder why I'm not focusing so well. There we go. That we talked about earlier. I'm just going to be using those instead for my 15-0s. So all I did was, once I had reinforced here, I came into my super duo top hole. I picked up 2 15-0s, sewed through the bottom, picked up 2 15-0s, sewed back through the top. I have currently sewn down these 2 15-0s, and now I'm going to sew over through just my super duo, making sure I don't hit any of the 15-0s. Now I'm in position to add my next super duo. Each time you pick up your super duos, or you could start ahead of time, but double check both holes of your super duo before you put them on each time. I am exiting to the right of my first super duo, so I'm going to pass back through that same super duo from the left to the right. This is right angle weave, and I'm going to add that next little super duo just like that. I am going to reinforce by coming down the 8-0, sew back through the new super duo, only in the same hole, the top hole, come up the 8-0 on this side, come back through just my super duo right there. And now I'm going to get into position by sewing right back down this 8-0 and coming through the super duo. Here I want to add my accent beads again, so I'll pick up the 2 15s. And I will sew through the bottom hole, the same side where my working thread is exiting, moving to the other side. And add 2 15-0s on this side also. And come right back through the top. Now I'm going to come down through just the 2 accent beads here. Well, I'm really having trouble seeing right now. And then we'll come through this bottom hole of just the super duo, like that. And then I'm going to take a look at it and see if I'm satisfied this time around. And I like that much better than I did those other accent beads, so pretty happy with that. Alright, so now I need to address the problem I was having of making sure my little round O beads substitute here will stay in place. I did like the colors I was using for my units, so I'm going to stick with that sequence. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pick up my sequence first. I'm picking up the 11, the true 2, the 8, the true, and the 11. I'm going to drop those down. Then I'm going to pick up this O bead. And I'm going to carry it down here. Now, to try to make this O bead stay where I want it to, you can see that my thread is exiting on the back side. I'm going to come back through that O bead and put a thread bridge on the outside edge of it. It kind of got away from me there, but it's okay. We can fix it. I'm going to slide it all the way down. And I'm going to try to make sure that that thread bridge will hold that O bead where I want it, right there. Let me see if I can get you a picture of the thread bridge. It's hard to see, but right there it is. You can see that white thread on the outside edge. It is so tiny. Trust me, I'm zoomed way in here. Now that's going to hold that O bead where I want it to be. All right. If you're using regular check glass O beads, you probably won't have that problem. But since I did, now I can pick up my sequence again, which once again was the 11-0, true 2, 8-0, true 2, 11-0. Then I can go ahead and pick up my super duo next. And these are the super duos that I pulled off, so I've already checked those holes. I'll pick up my sequence again. And I'll let all of that drop down, and I'm going to repeat that same thing I did with the O bead on this side. So I'm going to get those beads right there, just like that. I'm going to pick up this O bead, move it down. I'm going to hold on to it. I'm going to come back through it one more time and make my little thread bridge. It's the same thing we would be doing for a stop bead. It's just the same exact technique. I'm going to pull it into position just like that. So now you see my O beads are staying exactly where I need them to be. And that makes me a much happier person. Except for the small fact that I've got a problem. You can see here I've got 2 true 2s and no 11. So I'm going to have to fix this. All I got to do is come back through my O bead. Take off that O bead and take off that true 2. Glad I noticed that, because I would really be upset right now if I hadn't. Seeing as I've already taken my work out all the way apart one time, I'll drop these beads back down and pick up that 11-0. Get it where it goes. Now I'm going to do that O bead trick. Well, yeah, sure am glad I noticed that. Alright, I got this O bead pretty close to where it needs to be, so now let me put my thread bridge on it. Now we're looking like we should. It's always a good idea to double check what you're picking up. Alright, so now I need to pick up one more segment and pay a little bit more attention to what I'm doing. Okay, there's my last segment. So now I can come back through my super duo here on the base. My beads are all on the right hand side, so I'm coming back through left to right and forming my little unit. And now my O beads are behaving the way that I want them to. So now all I'm going to do is reinforce all these beads. I'm going to sew back through them. I won't have to reinforce my thread bridge because my beads are sitting still, but I do need to make sure I pass through that O bead. So go through your first bead segment. Pass through that O bead. Come through your second bead segment, pass through your super duo, and repeat those 2 steps all the way up here. Then just sew back down until you're exiting your bottom super duo. Yeah, that was a very interesting little start to my first video. But when you are designing or when you are changing the beads up in an existing pattern, these are the kind of things that you run into. Don't be afraid to start over. I do it all the time. But through the wonderful magic of filming, you guys don't know about that most of the time. But a lot of times I go ahead and tell you guys about it because it's all part of the process. Make sure you don't skip your 11-0 here at the top when you're coming back through to get into position. And I'm going to tell you, I really am much happier with that. It's got a couple of little extra steps, but it's going to eliminate the problem I was having. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to make this connection one more time. I am exiting the top of my last super duo. I'm going to add my first little accent beads. Pick up 2 15s, sew through to the other side. Pick up 2 15s, sew back through the top. Let me see if I can make this a little bit clearer. Then I'm going to sew down those 2 15s. And come back across just my super duo. I'm going to pick up an 8-0, a super duo 8-0. Come back through that super duo just like we just did. I'm going to reinforce this section by coming through my 8-0. The same hole of the new super duo, that top hole. Come up through just the 8-0. Come back through my previous 8-0 in the bottom. Make sure you don't pass through those 15s. Now I'm going to come down the 8-0 one more time. Come back into the new super duo. We're just going to go ahead and add our 2 little 15s on each side of this new super duo. And then I'll show you guys how to make the base unit one more time. Pick up 2 15s, sew through the bottom hole. Pick up 2 15s and sew back through that top hole. Come down through those 2 15s. And then go ahead and go back through just your super duo. Right like that. And I like that a lot better. So I'm really happy. All right, so now we're going to create one more of these little units. So we picked up the 11. That's one of my other 15s. Let me get rid of that. True 2, an 8. A true 2 and an 11. Drop them down. If you're using a check glass O bead, you can probably skip this step. I'm going to go ahead and pick up my little metallic O. Make sure it stays on the top of my 11-0. I'm going to pass back through my little metallic bead again. Put my thread bridge and just bring it down into place just like that. I don't want it too tight, but I don't want it loose. I want it sitting right on top of that 11. Now I can pick up my segment again. Well, there's another one of those little beads. 11, true, 8, true, 11. Now I'm going to pick up my super duo. 11, true 2, 8, true 2, 11, and I'm going to let them drop. Can't seem to get it right today, guys. Sorry about that. Alright, so now I'm going to repeat the steps for this little O bead. And I do not recall having this problem with the check glass O beads, so basically you're probably going to be able to skip this if that's what you're using. Putting my little thread bridge by passing through it again, sliding it into place. Pick up my last little segment, 11, true, 8, 2, and 11. Now my beads are on the right of my super duo on the base, so I'm coming back through that super duo left to right to form the unit. And then, folks, I'm just simply going to reinforce it just like we did before. I'm going to reinforce the whole unit. By going all the way around it one more time. And then I'll come back into position. I think I've got a little problem there. Alright. I'm going to come up all the way around. And a lot of people get tempted to skip these steps. I prefer to not skip. And most definitely because I did start over, I am definitely going to have to add thread. So what we're going to do at this point is let me work my way back down to my position. So you're going to come back around these beads until you're Xing that top hole of your super duo. Make sure you get through all your beads, guys, and don't try not to skip any or you'll have an exposed thread. I might put my headset on because I'm having trouble seeing with all of the... I have to have my lights really bright so you guys can see what I'm doing. But sometimes the glare just gives me a little bit of trouble seeing. Okay, so here I am, and I'm in position. We're just going to repeat those steps of adding the accent beads here, adding this next little unit with the 2 8/0s and the super duo, accent that super duo, and then repeat the steps for your unit. And I talked about the size in the part of this video I'm cut out, so what I'm going to do is show you guys again. I'm having a little ruler here, and I've got my already made sample. This little connection unit here from super duo to super duo is approximately 1/2 inch long. Let me see if I can find a spot where you can actually see it. So here's it measures out about 1/2 inch. I don't know if you can see it good enough. The little candy bead units also measure at 1/2 inch. So for each one of these segments, these 2 little units here, you're going to get about 1 inch bracelet. This bracelet is 7 inches long. And the only thing I did at the very end was add a small, tiny right angle weave unit, like we did when we started, the 8/0, the 2 11s, and the super duo. So that's where we're going to run our little jump rings through. That adds approximately, by the time you add the jump rings and the lobster claws, you're going to get it close to another inch. So I used, this is a 7-inch bracelet, I used 6 of these little units here, and then one more 1/2 inch unit there at the end, plus the part where, you know, to connect our jump ring. So depending on how big of a bracelet you need, if you need a 6-inch bracelet, you will only need to make 5 of your candy bead units going down. My arm is about a 6.5, but I'm not making this bracelet for myself. To add it, like, you know, say you needed a 6.5-inch bracelet, probably the best way to do it would to just be to go ahead and add one more little unit on the end. One of these little connector units. Because you're not going to be able to see that too much right here on the side of your wrist like that. And it will also help your bracelet to lay nice and flat on the bottom. Alright, so I think I'm going to go ahead and make a 7-inch bracelet out of this one. I am going to go ahead and continue working till I have 6 of my candy bead units added. We'll come back. I'm going to show you how to finish up the one end, we'll sew back through, and I'll show you guys how to work the second side. So now I've already threaded some new thread on to my needle. And I want to talk to you for a couple minutes about how I'm going to tie back into this project. Now, because I'm going to have to do a lot more sewing through these beads that are on my Candy Bead units, is I'm going to have to come back through and not only add the candy beads, but I'm also going to put those little embellishments on the side. And because I've used 15 rows here on my connection units, I don't want to jam a whole bunch of thread between all these beads, which could potentially make it difficult, if not impossible, for me to do the remaining tasks I need to do on this bracelet. So I'm going to show you a really easy way to sew in a new thread to this project. I am going to take my needle. I'm going to come up above these last two little 15 O's. Let me see if I can get you in here so you can really see. There's my new super duo I added. Here's the one from the previous one. I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to come under this thread. Well, I'm going to try to get under this thread. I'm having trouble seeing. I'm going to come under this little thread right here, between that 15-0 and the top hole of that super duo. There's a couple of threads there. You can see both of them on my needle. I'm going to come pull this through really, really slow till I've got myself enough tail thread on the other side to where I can tie a little knot right there. So I'm going to be really careful because I don't want that thread shifting around in here. So I'm going to go ahead and start my knot. I'm going to tie my 2 strings into an overhand knot. I'm going to position this so that when I pull these 2 strings together, you can see that they're sitting right in the middle of my 15-0 beads now. And I guess that's okay. That's not exactly where I stuck my needle, but they're sitting there and I'm going to go for it. So I am going to just go ahead and pull that through so that knot lands right there between them beads. As long as both strings were sitting between there, it's going to be an okay place to put that little knot. I'm going to do one more. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make sure that those 2 threads wind up in the middle of those 2 15-0 beads. I'm just pull. And I'm going to pull really snug like that. So now I've got that thread tied on. And I'm looking pretty good. So what I'm going to do is now I only got to take my needle. And I'm going to come back through just the 15. I don't want to go under that thread. So I'm going to come through just that 15. Make sure your needle's coming out of there clean. You don't accidentally get under that next thread bridge there. If you do, you're going to have a mess. It's not really going to be a mess, but it will make something very noticeable. Alright, so now I'm going to pull that nice and snug, and I'm going to pull until I hear that little knot pop right inside of that 15-0 bead. And once it does, I know that knot is nice and secure, and it's not going to slip back out. I'm going to use my thread zapper here, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to burn off that tail thread right there. Get it out of my way. So now I exited that 15-0 C bead. I need to sew across my super duo. We're going to follow the same exact thread path that we normally would follow, so we can minimize the amount of exposed thread on our project. Now I can simply just work down this 8-0. I can sew through my last super duo. And I'm ready to put my accent beads on either side of this super duo. So I've got that to do, and I've got one more unit here to add of my candy bead units. And I'll meet you guys back and show you how to create the mirror image end on the opposite side of the bracelet. And then I'll show you guys how to sew through and start our next, our second strand of this bracelet. So here I am, and I have created my 6 units for my candy beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Where I am is I need to mirror image this ending that I have on the opposite end. So I have my first super duo, of course, that constitutes part of the other unit. And I'm picking up my 8/0 Super Duo 8/0, just like we've done for all of our connection units. We're going to go ahead and reinforce that exactly like we've been doing. So all the way around, one bead at a time. Pull it nice and snug so that everything looks good. Come up the last 8/0 here. Come back across my Super Duo on the base. Then I'm going to get back down into position by coming down the 8/0 and through the top hole of my new Super Duo. Now I just need to add 2 accent beads on each side, so that's my little 15s. And my last 2. And once again, we'll come down through those 2 15-0s and go back through the Super Duo one last time. Alright, so now the only thing we have left to do is to add the 3 beads here at the top. And that's really easy because all we used was an 11/0, an 8/0, and 11/0. And we're just going to make that right angle weave unit by passing right back through our Super Duo. And then we're going to reinforce those 3 beads, because that is the end of the bracelet where our jump ring is going to go. And we want to make sure that that thread stays nice and secure with everyday normal wear and tear and, you know, taking the clasp together and apart. When you or your customer wants to wear your beautiful bracelet. Coming back through that Super Duo. Alright, so if I were to get my little trusty ruler out here and get my inches showing. If you look at this bracelet, you can see that it's measuring pretty close to 6.5 inches. You don't want to stretch it out because basically as we come through and add the candy beads in later, it's going to pull these back into a nice little round shape, as you can see on the back of my first sample. So in other words, it's going to shrink that up a little bit and pull these little units right back into that pretty round shape. So if everything looks good and you've got the sizing that you want, if you need a half size, before adding those last 3 beads on the end, you can always add another Super Duo, add your embellishment beads, and then add your 3 beads on the very end. So now that we've got our 2 ends looking identical, we have 2 options on as to how we can proceed to add our second little strand. Like this. Option 1 would be to tie some half-inch knots and end this thread off, start our new strand just like we did on this end, and then as we work our first candy bead unit, we will connect here at the O bead. Now we can also do that simply just by sewing back through the beads and making sure that we start our work right here at this O bead. So let me show you how to do that. So when I ended off, my working thread is exiting from the Super Duo on the right. I can simply sew back down through the 2 15-0s here. We're just going to follow our same thread path till we get down to one of our O beads. I'm going to come back through that Super Duo. I'm going to come through my 8-0. I'm going to pass back through the next super duo. Then I'll have to come through the 2 15-0s here along the side. You make sure that you're getting in both beads. And then we'll come through the top hole of that super duo. And now we can just work through our segment beads here, the 11, true to 8, true to 11, and the O bead. If you didn't use a true to, you'll go through all of your 11-0s, your 8-0, your 11-0 on that segment. And then we're going to come into our little O bead. And make sure that we're only passing through the O bead and not the 11-0 on the other side. So at this point, we're switching over to a flat cubic right angle weave. And when you're doing this technique, you're going to already have one of your beads in place here, which is our O bead. So what we need to pick up first will be this corresponding segment, which will be the 11, true to, 8-0, true to and another 11. Then we'll pick up our super duo. Check both your holes. Then repeat your segment. 11 true, 8 true, and 11. We're going to let those all fall down into place. And this is what we've picked up so far. So now I'm going to have to do my little trick with my O bead before I can continue. And if you're, like I said before, if you're using the check glass O beads, you probably can skip this. If you're using these little 4mm metallic beads, the hole is a little bit bigger, so we're making an allowance for that by adding our thread bridge. Alright, so now I need to pick up my segment again of the 11, the true 2, the 8-0, the true 2, and the 11. And then now I need to pick up my top super duo here. And I'm going to check both of those holes, just like I've been doing. And I'm going to pick up one more segment of 11, true 2, the 8, the true, and the 11. So I have all these beads on. And so now I am ready to come back through that metallic O that I started from. I'm going to pull all that into place. And you can see that we've created a brand new candy bead unit here on the side. Just like that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to reinforce. I'm going to come through all of these beads. Make sure I get in the top holes of my super duos. I'm going to come through these beads. When I get to this bead, I am going to create this segment once again. So let's go ahead and get on to that. Just simply move through and start reinforcing. It's a little bit awkward right here at the beginning, but it gets a lot easier just as soon as we get this little portion created. And get it reinforced and nice and firmed up. Make sure you don't skip any beads because you do not want to have an exposed thread. And I come through my O. Now I'm working my way towards that super duo I was talking about. And once I get there, I'm going to halt with my slight little reinforcement here. Because I don't want to put too much thread in these beads. Now as I work this part, I'm going to have to be really careful not to let these beads loosen up right here. So let's start with our little 15-ohs. Come through the top hole. And this should secure that thread by the time we add these last two beads to where we don't have to worry too much about it loosening. Come back through my super duo with the next two 15-ohs. I'm going to come down through those two 15-ohs. Come through my super duo. And now I can go ahead and create this little segment. We've done it several times now, so I'm not going to make you guys sit here and watch me go through it on camera. But I will meet you back as soon as I get that this portion done. And don't forget to add your 3 little accent beads here at the top, through which we're going to connect our jump ring. Maybe I will sit here with you guys. Alright, so I'm going to reinforce that really quick. My thread's a little bit longer, but I wanted to tie a halfway decent length of thread so I would not have to add thread more than one more time. I don't like it too long because it tends to get hung up on everything laying around my desk. But I don't really mind adding a little extra thread here and there. Alright, so now we're ready to come back down this 8/0. I'm going to come through the super duo. And then I'm going to put the little accent beads. So we're going to pick up those 15s, come through, pick up the other two 15s, come back through. And now I can work my way through the two 15-ohs here. And across the super duo, then I'm going to add those little accent beads. Then we'll work our way back into our project here. So we need the 11, the 8, and the 11. And we're just going to come right back through our super duo. Excuse me. We're going to reinforce those once. One bead at a time works the best to keep those beads into the correct position so that they look nice and they're not all out of shape. So now I just got to come back through this super duo. And when I do, you see that beautiful little finish there at the top. Alright, so now our next step is going to be, we are going to work our way down to this super duo right here. So come through your two 15s on the side. We're just going to follow our thread path. And take your time, make sure you don't skip the beads. We're going to come through that super duo. We're doing exactly what we did when we added these 3 beads here. We're just working our way back around our units. We're going to come through the top of that next super duo. And we'll come down the 2/15 here on this side. I'm going to turn those just a little so I can see to get my needle in. Well, if you're having trouble seeing like I am, you can always take them one at a time. But I managed to get through. Alright. Now I just need to come back through the bottom hole of the super duo. And I can work my way around to where I want to be. Alright, so my thread is exiting here to the right of the super duo, so I'm going to work my way down through these beads. Don't skip your 11-0 there. Make sure you go through the 11-0, the true, the 8, and so forth. Until you get back to where you started from, which is right there at the O bead. And then come on around to your super duo. Grab your 11, your true 2s, 8 O's, and the 11-0. Alright, so now the next thing we got to do is just build our segments. When I get that done, I'm going to come back. I'll show you one more time how to create this unit with the O bead. Create your connection segment, and I'll meet you back for the next step. So here I am, and I have gotten my little connection piece done and embellished. And my working thread is exiting to the right of, in this position, of this super duo. So to get to my next unit here, of course, I just need to pick up the one segment, and I would sew through that O bead, just like we did before. However, for example, if your working thread happened to be exiting the outer side of this super duo, you would need to come from this super duo all the way around, pick up all the beads needed to go down this side, the super duo, and then one more segment up here. So that would be this segment of beads. I would have to tie on one of my super duo, or my O beads. It would be another segment. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought slightly. And then a super duo. And then one last segment of my 5 beads here before I sewed up through this. So we would pick up the last little segment. And I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that before we moved forward, because basically I can't be sure which side of the super duo you're coming out of. You could be coming out over here. Then you would need all of these beads. And I didn't tie my O bead on. We're pretending that we were coming out of this side, so let's kind of flip it. We would have to pick up all of those beads and sew up through the O bead on our first strand. Then add the last segment of beads and sew back through the super duo here. Alright, so what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to take all of those beads off, and I am going to work my way down. So I'm going to create my next candy bead unit, another connection, and so forth on till I get down here. And I'll meet you guys back after I add this last little unit of the candy bead unit. So here I am, and I have completed the base of my bracelet. I went ahead and finished my last little section here, the connector section, and I sewed up and added my three bead segment here at the top of the super duo, just like we did on our other 3 parts, and I reinforced that really well. So now we are done with our O beads. We can put those away. We can put our super duos away. And we can also put the 8/0s away. The only thing we need left are our 15/0s, our candy beads, and then you can either use 11/0s or the true 2s or a combination. Just depends on how you want to do it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and clean this up really, really quick, and I'll come back and I'm going to show you guys how to sew down, and we're going to start adding the candy beads in. Alright, so I've got some of the mess cleaned up out of the way, and I am ready to sew back down to my first Super Duo unit. My first candy bead unit. So I'm exiting from that Super Duo. All I need to do is sew down the 2 15s, and we should be getting pretty used to how we maneuver through this beadwork now. I'm going to come back across the Super Duo, come down the 8/0, across the next Super Duo, right here. And then the 2 15/0s along the side of this Super Duo. And we're going to come back across that last Super Duo. Now to add our candy beads, these candy beads are 2-hole beads. We're going to orient the holes of our beads like this, across the unit this way. And I'm going to be using my 8/0 seed beads in my 5 bead segments to connect these candy beads into the center of each of these units. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and sew through that 11/0, the true 2, and the 8/0. And of course, if you used 2 11/0s there, you would just sew through both 11/0s and go through the 8/0. And because I'm left-handed, you can see where my thread is exiting this 8/0. It's going to position me trying to sew across my beadwork like this to add that bead. So all I'm really going to do to help myself out is I'm going to poke my needle right through the center, and I'm going to flip my bracelet around. That's just because I am left-handed, and it makes it easier for me to work that way. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a true 2, and I'm going to pick my candy bead up so that when I sew across, I'm on the top hole with the dome part facing up. So when I sew across, I want the dome to be on top, like that. I'm going to pick up one more of my true 2s right here. And I'm just going to let those drop off my needle. Here I am exiting the bottom of this 8/0 seed bead. I'm going to take my needle, I'm going to come straight across, and I'm going to sew up from bottom to top through the 8/0 seed bead on the opposite side. I'll pull that into position. I am going to pick up one more of my true 2s, and I'm going to come back through that same hole on my candy bead. Pull that through so that this is what I have. I have those 2 fire polish going into the same hole, but on opposite sides of my 8/0. So now I'm coming around, and I am on this side of my bead. I started out from the bottom of this 8/0, so I'm going to pick up my last true 2, and I'm going to come through that 8/0 from this time from top to bottom on this side. I'm going to pull that bead, and I'm going to get that to position itself in there. So see how that kind of raises the bead up? It looks really pretty. Now, if you don't have the true 2s, what I suggest doing is picking up a 15/0, then an 11, then the candy bead, go across to the 8/0, sew up. Pick up a 15 and 11, sew through back through the candy bead, pick up an 11 and a 15, and then sew back through your 8/0 on this side. So now that I'm coming out this 8/0, I want to work my way down to the 8/0 here at the bottom. So I'm just going to pass through the beads here along this side, making sure I get through all of them and don't skip any until I reach that next 8/0. Just like that. And now I'm going to repeat the steps. I'm going to pick up a true 2. I'm going to sew through the bottom hole of this candy bead. I am going to pick up my other true 2. And I'm going to sew. Let's see, I was coming out of the bottom here, so I'm going to come through this one from top to bottom. Like that. Pull that bead into position. I'm going to pick up one more. Come back through the hole in my candy bead. And I'm going to pick up my last 2mm fire polish bead. And I am going to come back through that same 8/0 on this side I started from, this time from bottom to top again, because I want to put a fire polish there on that thread bridge. And so this is what my beadwork looks like. You see how we've lifted that candy bead sort of up. At the same time, if you'll notice how rounded the back of our base unit looks. So it is actually, by doing the steps this way, we are actually shaping our base unit and adding our embellishment, which is the candy bead and the fire polish. So now I'm going to sew down to my next super duo. So I'll just have to come through the 3 beads. The fire polish on the base, the 11/0, and the super duo. And I'm just going to sew through the beads again, just like I did here at the top, until I reach my next unit. And that's basically all there is to it. So we'll go ahead and I'll show you guys one more. So I'm just going to go ahead and come down these 2 15/0s and get my needle in there. Come across the super duo. Down the 8/0 and across the next super duo. As you come through these super duos, you want to make sure your needle doesn't go under any threads. See how my needle is clean on both sides? I've not caught any of those threads. It's really important when you're working through your beadwork to make sure that you don't catch threads. It really can mess up the appearance of your finished product. So I'm going to come down those 2 15/0s on this side. Come back through the bottom hole of my super duo and then work my way into that first 8/0. So I just have to pass through the next 3 beads there. So now we're ready to add our next candy bead. And you'll notice that I make sure the orientation of that bead is correct. I pick up a fire polish, the candy bead, and a fire polish. I am exiting from the bottom of that 8/0. As I come across the beadwork, I'm going to go through the 8/0 on the other side from top to bottom, kind of like opposites. We're making an X, in other words. Make sure I get my thread situated. Now I'm going to pick up a fire polish and sew right back through my candy bead right here. If your beadwork if the bead gets away from you, don't worry, you can tighten that candy bead right back into position. Now we are exiting from the candy bead. Make sure that you haven't went under that thread, which if you'll notice here, mine is coming out clean. I'm not underneath that existing thread right here from the fire polish we added at the beginning. I'm going to pick up my fire polish bead and I'm going to come back down through the 8/0 here on the ring of this unit from top to bottom. Remember, I started stitching from the bottom of that bead, so now I want to come through the top of that bead and position that fire polish on this side of the 8-0, on the top side. Pull everything in nice and pretty, and work your way down the beads to the next 8-0 and the lower half of this unit, right there. I'm going to pick up this fire polish and sew through the bottom hole of my candy bead. I'm going to pick up my next fire polish, and I was exiting the bottom of that 8-0 here, so I need to come through the top of the 8-0 on this side. I'm going to pick up the fire polish and come back through the lower hole of this bead. And once again, I got to pick up my last fire polish. And I'm going to come through the 8-0 on this side, back again from top to bottom, to position that fire polish here on the top section. And then I am going to pull everything nice and snug, shape everything up, and I am going to move down the next 2 beads and into that super duo. And that's all I'm going to do all the way down to the end of this side of the bracelet. So I will go ahead and add the remaining 4 candy beads on this side. I'll meet you guys back and show you how to sew across, and we'll do the same thing on our second strand of our bracelet. So I have completed one side of this bracelet. I added my last candy bead here, and I've sewn through the beads till I reached my super duo. Now, if I were to, I could potentially sew down this segment of beads, pass through my metal O bead here, and sew across and down into this bead here. I could begin right here adding my cabochon bead and come up to here, but basically what that's going to wind up doing is changing the actual pattern I was using to sew these beads in. And to make things more difficult, when I finish sewing that bead in, I'm going to have to do a bunch of circling around in order to be able to move down into the next segment here for the next candy bead. I don't want to have to go through all of that, so I'm going to end this thread, and I'm simply going to tie on over into the other strand. So I'm exiting that super duo. I'm just going to go ahead and push through a couple of beads here, like the 11-0 and the fire polish bead. And I'm going to come out of that fire polish bead, and I'm going to tie a couple of half-hitch knots, and I'm going to end this thread. So here I am, coming through my 11 and my fire polish. I am going to pass my needle under the thread bridge right there between that fire polish and that 8-0 seed bead. I'm going to pull slow, grab my loop, and I'm going to make sure that knot falls in between that fire polish and that 8-0. I'm going to come around a few more beads. I'm going to come through the 8-0 and the next fire polish. I'm going to do that again between my fire polish and my 11-0. I'm just going to come right through that little center there underneath the thread. Pull nice and slow till I have my loop. Pass my needle through. Pull that down so that it pops between that fire polish and that 11-0. Make sure you move away from your final knot before you end your thread. I'm going to come through to the other side of my little O bead. Hung on my bracelet end there. And I'm going to come through that next 11-0, and I'm going to tie a couple more knots. I'm just going to work my way around this circle. I'm going to cut the thread. And I will show you guys how, I already showed you how to tie on, but I'll show you a good place to tie on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie my thread back on. And what I want to do is I want to start on the inside edge of this super duo so that when I tie my knot, come down through the 11, pass through the super duo, I will sew in this direction to reach that same 8/0 seed bead, like I did when I was working on this side. So I pass my needle under the thread between those two 15/0s, just like I did earlier, the last time I tied on thread. And I'm going to pull my knot so that it snugs in between those two 15/0 seed beads. You can see them right there on the side. I'm going to pull that thread so that it pops right in between my two 15/0s. I'm going to tie one more and do the same thing. So now I'm in a position I can just simply take my needle and pass down that one 15/0 and pull that knot inside of that bead right there. And once I have it pulled in there and I feel it pop in, I can get rid of this excess thread. You can use scissors, you can use a thread burner. I like to use the thread burner here because I like to get as close to the beadwork as I can right there. Just like that. And now, like I said, I can come through my super duo following my thread path. Make sure you don't go through that 15/0 on the other side, just the super duo. And then sew down into your 8/0 bead and add the rest of your candy beads. So I have come back through and added as many of my candy beads as I could, and I guess these little packs must have about 180 of the 2mm fire polish beads. And what I wound up needing, because I used them on my base and to put my candy beads in, I wound up actually needing 196. So I'm shy 12 beads, but that's okay. I'm going to pick them up tomorrow and finish this up. But right now I'm just going to show you guys how to end your project. Once you've added all your candy beads in, if you feel like you need to, you can go back through and reinforce by sewing through all of your beads again here that you used to put your candy beads in position, whether you use the 15s and 11s, whether you used a true tube bead like I did. Then you will just simply weave your thread off, tie a few half-hitch knots or whichever your preference is. Once you have all of that done, what we're going to do is just take our little jump rings, and like I said at the beginning, I have 4 jump rings and 2 lobster claws. All I need to do is open up one of my jump rings and fish it through my 8/0. And sorry about that, my daughter called, but all I'm going to do is open my jump ring and I'm going to thread my jump ring through. On this end of the bracelet, I'm also going to add my lobster claws, and I want my lobster claws to go on a certain way. So I want the little catch piece to be facing upwards the same way that the top of my bracelet is going. So I'm just going to make sure that I put that on there the right way before I close the jump ring. And you want to make sure that you use a little bit of this back and forth action to create a good snap on the jump ring, and that it's closed all the way like that, so that when you bring it around to latch it this way, everything is lined up correctly. So just do that and add your 2 plain jump rings down on this end to give your jump rings something, or your lobster claws something to attach to. All right. When you come around to do your jump rings on this end, don't forget to end off your tail thread. And all I did was I wove it down through and tied some half-hitch knots, just like we did when we were adding and ending the working thread throughout the project. And work your way down, tie at least 3, maybe more half-hitch knots, move through a bead before you cut the thread. Then just simply do the same thing, open your jump rings and add them on this end. And here's what the closure looks like. once you get it finished. And here's the beautiful front of the bracelet. Alright folks, I hope you have enjoyed the first membership members only tutorial. And I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you for signing up for my members only videos. It means a lot to me, and it will go a long way to help support my channel. Alright guys, that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and enjoy your beautiful bracelet.